War has always driven humanity, shaping nations and toppling empires in an inexorable cycle, destruction feeding rebirth, only to collapse again. From ancient battles over gold to modern wars for oil and uranium, until the 21st century turned the spoils of war into weapons of its own annihilation. In 2053, the final cataclysm erupted, alliances shattered, nations burned, and within hours, nuclear fire reduced civilization to ash, leaving only ruins and echoes. Survivors retreated into vast underground bunkers, generations growing in sheltered ignorance, until necessity forced them into the irradiated wasteland above, a shattered world where survival meant rebuilding or succumbing to chaos. Legends lingered, of a nameless hero who saved a world that feared him, only to be exiled into the desolation he fought to protect, of sealed vaults entombing those clinging to the past, and of humanity's fleeting zenith, where technology defied limits and cities pierced the clouds, until insatiable consumption drained the planet, desperation lit the fuse, and war devoured the last embers of hope. And a soldier, haunted by duty and lost kin, faced history's oldest truth: no matter how far humanity climbed, war followed, relentless and unchanging. Now, as the radiation-scorched emerge to rebuild, the question hangs like smoke over the wastes: will they break the cycle, or will the future bleed into the past, born again from war's eternal shadow? The world was promised a future of boundless progress, gleaming cities, limitless energy, and utopian ideals. Instead, it ended in atomic fire. Generations later, the children of the past now walk the ruins of a civilization that betrayed them, emerging from underground shelters engineered not for protection, but as grim social experiments. The wasteland that greets them is a brutal crucible of survival, where warlords, rogue AI, and irradiated monstrosities stake their claim. Scavenging for lost knowledge and searching for vanished loved ones, survivors must navigate tangled webs of deceit, power struggles, and long-forgotten horrors. In a world where trust is a currency more scarce than water, the line between savior and tyrant is razor-thin. Rebuild, conquer, or perish, the wasteland does not forgive weakness. A sharp hiss cut through the silence. Cold. Bone-deep, unnatural cold. Cole's eyelids fluttered as his body convulsed involuntarily. His lungs burned, his muscles locked in place. Then, sudden warmth. A rush of air filled his lungs as his chest expanded for the first time in how long? His eyes snapped open, only to be met with a thick layer of frost-covered glass. Panic surged. He tried to move, but his limbs wouldn't respond. A loud mechanical clunk echoed in the chamber as the glass casing before him hissed, releasing a cloud of cold vapor. The cryotube. Cole gasped as his body lurched forward, spilling onto the hard steel floor in a graceless heap. His skin stung from the shift in temperature, his fingers twitching as if they had forgotten how to function. The metallic taste of oxygen-rich air filled his mouth as he coughed violently, each breath painful but necessary. He was alive. The cryo experiment worked. Cole pushed himself up, his muscles aching as blood circulation returned. His fingers pressed against the smooth metal of the cryopod behind him, its surface now slick with condensation. A faint blue glow pulsed along its control panel, displaying error, system malfunction. His head throbbed. He tried to remember the last thing before this, before the cold. 2030. The cryonics experiment. He volunteered to be frozen, to wake up in a few weeks, maybe months. But this place. The stale air, the flickering lights, the dust and rust lining the walls. This was wrong. Cole's breathing slowed, his heartbeat steadying as his senses sharpened. The room was dimly lit, cast in flickering red hues from overhead emergency lights. Rows of cryopods lined the walls. The faint hum of failing machinery filled the air, accompanied by the occasional crackle of overhead speakers. And then he noticed the smell. Rot. His gaze drifted across the room, settling on a cryopod across from his. Its glass was fractured from the inside. The control panel flickered weakly, and inside. The corpse was still strapped in place. Skin shrunken against bone, eyes sunken, mouth locked in a silent scream. A thick layer of frost clung to its limbs, frozen in death. Cole swallowed, forcing his breath to remain even. His hands clenched into fists. How long had he been asleep? His eyes darted to a rusted metal door at the end of the chamber. The corridor beyond was dark. He needed answers. And he needed to get out. Cole's breath was still visible in the cold air as he took his first shaky step away from the malfunctioning cryopod. His legs felt weak, unsteady, but the rush of adrenaline kept him moving. The chamber was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of struggling machines and the occasional flicker of the emergency lights. He turned, scanning the room. Rows of cryo tubes stretched across the walls, their reinforced glass covered in frost and condensation. Some pods were cracked, their occupants long dead, shrunken husks frozen in their final moments. Others blinked with flickering error messages, their panels coated in grime and rust. Something had gone horribly wrong in this place. A cold shiver ran down his spine. How long had he been in there? Months? Years? Cole's fingers ran across the terminal next to his pod. The screen was shattered, the keyboard caked in dust. No way to check the date. He scanned the walls for any indication of time, but aside from the corroded C Vault 79 logo stamped on a rusted metal panel, there was nothing useful. He needed to move. The door to the main hallway stood slightly ajar, a jagged dent in the metal as if something had tried to pry it open. Cole exhaled, forcing his still numb fingers to grip the edge and push. The door let out a strained groan before finally sliding open. Darkness swallowed the hallway beyond. The corridor stretched out before him, its ceiling lined with exposed wiring and flickering bulbs barely clinging to life. Red emergency lighting cast long shadows across the metal floor, where scattered debris, broken tools, discarded clothing, shattered glass, told stories of panic and disorder. Cole stepped cautiously, his shoes crunching against dried flakes of rust. The air was damp, thick with the scent of mildew and something metallic. The vault wasn't just old, it was abandoned. He passed a ruined security checkpoint, its console dark and unpowered. A once functional turret lay in the corner, detached from the ceiling, its barrel warped from an apparent meltdown. The deeper he went, the more signs of struggle became obvious. A bullet-riddled wall, with streaks of old blood staining the rivets. A battered storage crate, its contents looted long ago. A NCI maintenance bot, powered down and covered in dust. Someone, or something, had been here before. Cole swallowed hard. He had to find supplies before he ran into anything still lurking in these halls. He reached what looked like a small storage closet, its door hanging loosely off its hinges. A quick glance inside revealed mostly useless junk, rusted screwdrivers, empty ration boxes, old datapads with shattered screens. Then, something useful. A half-empty water bottle, stale, but drinkable. A worn-out backpack, small, but better than nothing. A flashlight, its light weak but still functional. Cole slung the backpack over his shoulder, clicked the flashlight on, and turned back toward the hallway. A distant sound echoed through the vault. He froze. A scrape. A dragging sound. Somewhere down the corridor, something was moving. His pulse quickened. He wasn't alone. Cole tightened his grip on the flashlight as he moved deeper into the corridor. Every step felt heavier than the last, the silence pressing in around him. The stale air carried a metallic scent, mingled with something else, decay. The walls of the vault bore deep scratches, as if something had been dragged through the halls. Some of the old directional signs were faded but still legible, marked with the Nexus Core Industries, NCI, emblem, a stark hexagonal design with the words "Humanity preserved. The future secured." If only that were true. Cole's boots crunched over shattered glass as he stepped into a former residential sector of the vault. He passed by dorm rooms, most left wide open, their contents scattered. Faint shadows from flickering emergency lights stretched across the walls, making the place feel even more desolate. Inside one of the rooms, a metal locker stood half open. Cole cautiously pulled the door wider and scanned its contents. Most of it was useless, old jumpsuits, books turned brittle with age, a ruined mattress, but then, something caught his eye. A small first aid kit, partially crushed but still intact. A multi-tool, rusted, but functional. A handheld radio, dead, but worth keeping. Cole stuffed them into his backpack, adjusting the strap across his chest. Every item mattered now. He turned toward the door, and froze. A low metallic creak echoed from further down the corridor. Cole shut off the flashlight instinctively, pressing his back against the wall. He held his breath, listening. At first, there was only silence. Then, a faint shuffling sound. Not footsteps. Not quite. Something was moving. A shape flickered just beyond the reach of the emergency lights. It moved slowly, unnaturally, limbs jerking at odd angles. Cole's heart pounded. Human? Or something else? He reached into his backpack, gripping the multitool like a makeshift weapon. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The figure in the darkness let out a ragged, wheezing sound. Then it moved toward him. The shuffling sound grew louder. Uneven, unnatural. Cole pressed himself harder against the cold metal wall, his grip tightening around the multitool. His breathing was slow and controlled, but his pulse pounded in his ears. Whatever was in the corridor wasn't moving like a person. Then, a figure lurched into the flickering red light. Cole's stomach twisted. The thing had once been human. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched too tightly over its bones. Patches of its jumpsuit were still visible beneath the layers of scars and deep-set wounds. Wires jutted from its forearms, embedded in flesh, sparking with each movement. Its mouth hung slightly open, jaw twitching as if trying to form words. But the eyes, clouded, sunken, were empty. Cole barely stopped himself from gasping aloud. He'd seen enough medical research on experimental treatments gone wrong to know that whatever this was, it wasn't alive in any natural sense. A shuddering breath escaped the thing's throat, and its head snapped toward him. It saw him. The moment hung in suffocating silence. Then, it charged. Cole didn't think, he ran. The creature let out a distorted, gurgling noise, its movements jerky but fast. Cole sprinted down the hallway, skidding around a corner as he frantically searched for an escape. His flashlight flickered as he aimed it ahead. The corridor split, a collapsed passage on one side, an open maintenance room on the other. No time to decide. He dived into the maintenance room, slamming his back against the wall as he frantically searched for something, anything, he could use as a weapon. A rusted metal pipe. A toolbox filled with broken equipment. A half-working terminal, flickering with distorted text. The creature slammed against the doorframe, its fingers twitching as it clawed at the metal. Its gurgling breath filled the room. Cole gritted his teeth, gripping the pipe. If he had to fight, he'd make it count. Cole's fingers tightened around the rusted pipe. His heartbeat hammered against his ribs. The thing in the doorway let out a wet, rattling breath, its head twitching unnaturally. It was watching him, waiting. The emergency lights flickered again, and for a brief second, he could see the full extent of what had been done to it. Metal plating embedded into its shoulders. Thin wires running down its arms, piercing through muscle and bone. Its left hand, twisted and malformed, had been replaced with something mechanical. A failed experiment. Cole took a slow step back, his eyes darting toward the room's only other exit, a narrow ventilation shaft, half collapsed with rust. The creature lurched forward. No choice. Fight or die. Cole gritted his teeth and swung. The pipe connected with the thing's shoulder, metal striking metal with a sickening crunch. The creature stumbled but didn't stop, instead, it lunged. Cole barely managed to twist away, feeling the cold, jagged edge of its mechanical hand slice through the air where his throat had been seconds before. It wasn't just fast. It was learning. He didn't wait for a second attempt. Cole dove for the ventilation shaft, kicking away a pile of rusted tools and dragging himself inside. The metal groaned under his weight, but it held. Behind him, the creature let out a shriek of frustration, its voice layered with something almost robotic. Then, it started tearing at the vent. Cole crawled faster. The ventilation tunnel was narrow and suffocating, the air thick with dust and decay. Cole's hands slipped on the rusted metal as he dragged himself forward. The creature's screeches echoed behind him, followed by the sound of something pounding against the vent's entrance. Then, silence. Cole didn't stop moving. He had no idea how many of those things were in the vault. Finally, the vent opened into another abandoned corridor, this one even darker than before. Cole rolled out, gasping for air, his hands scraped and raw. He pushed himself up, scanning the area. This section of the vault was different. It wasn't just abandoned. It was sealed off. Large reinforced doors lined the hallway, each marked with hazard symbols. Warning signs plastered the walls, most unreadable due to time and grime. A collapsed security station stood at the end of the hall, its screen still blinking faintly. Cole swallowed hard. This wasn't just a civilian shelter. Something else had been happening here. Cole wiped his palms against his jeans, trying to shake off the lingering tremor in his fingers. The thing in the vent wasn't following him anymore, but that didn't mean he was safe. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with reinforced doors, each marked with hazard signs. Biohazard. Radiation warning. Restricted access. Some were sealed shut, others pried open long ago, their contents stripped or left to rot. The collapsed security station at the end of the hall blinked with faint light, its screen cracked but still functioning. Cole hesitated. It could have answers, or another warning too late to be useful. Still, he stepped forward, reaching out to the terminal. The screen flickered to life, displaying a corrupted Nexus Core Industries, NCI, login screen. Most of the text was garbled, but a single operational file remained accessible. Access log, C Vault 79, Project Revenant. Date, error. Status, containment breach. Subject viability remains. Data corrupted, cellular deterioration still present, but neural response shows promising results. Limited cognitive retention detected, though subjects exhibit heightened aggression. Full motor control achieved. Proceeding with. Data corrupted, Vault Overseer has ordered full lockdown. Cole's stomach twisted. This vault, it wasn't just a shelter. It was a test site. The creature he encountered. It hadn't just been a survivor warped by time. It had been made. A metallic clang echoed down the corridor. Cole's breath hitched as he shut off the terminal. Something was still moving in this sector. He turned, scanning the nearby doors. Some of them had observation windows, thick glass reinforced with steel plating. Most were cracked or clouded with age, but one was clear enough to see inside. He wished it wasn't. A cryopod, similar to the one he had been trapped in, stood against the back wall. But this one was still active. Inside, a figure twitched. Its body was partially decayed, patches of skin peeled away to reveal exposed muscle and metal plating beneath. A mask covered its mouth, hooked to breathing tubes that pulsed with slow, unnatural movement. It wasn't awake. Not yet. Cole backed away. He needed to get out of this vault. Cole stared at the figure inside the cryopod, his breath shallow. The machine hummed softly, a ghostly contrast to the silent, abandoned vault. Whatever this thing was, it had been here a long time, long enough for its flesh to decay, long enough for whatever experiment had been done to it to take root. He needed to move. Fast. His eyes flicked back to the nearby security station, its cracked screen still faintly glowing. If the power in this sector was still running, there was a chance the logs hadn't been wiped. Answers. Cole had to know. He wiped the dust from the console and pressed a few keys. The system lagged, then loaded, displaying a file directory under Project Revenant. Only one log remained intact. Project Revenant Director's Report. Date, corrupted. Subjects display enhanced motor function despite advanced decay. Neural integrity remains unpredictable. Early trials confirm previous containment concerns, mental deterioration occurs within hours of reanimation. Aggression is the dominant trait. The director has ordered accelerated testing. We do not have clearance to shut down the program. Facility personnel are advised to avoid non-essential interaction with subjects. Final status, full lockdown initiated. Containment breach imminent. Cole's stomach churned. They hadn't been preserving people in these pods. They had been reanimating them. That thing, the one he had barely escaped from, was one of them. A noise, metal scraping against metal. Cole's head snapped toward the hallway. The sound was getting closer. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to keep digging, but instinct screamed at him, he didn't have time. Another screech, this time closer. He shut off the screen, grabbed his pack, and moved. He sprinted toward the opposite end of the hall, scanning for a way out. His original path was compromised, he needed another exit. Cole moved fast. Every instinct screamed at him to get out. The halls were silent, but he knew better than to trust the quiet. Something was following him. He could feel it. The path back to where he'd come from was a death trap. He had to find another way out, something the director hadn't locked down when the facility went into full containment. A sign above one of the doors caught his eye. NCI Primary Access Lift, authorized personnel only. Bingo! He sprinted toward it. The metal door was jammed half open, stuck in place by rust and neglect. Beyond it, a dark stairwell led down. No elevator, just emergency access. Cole exhaled sharply. Down wasn't ideal. But neither was staying here. With a final glance behind him, he slipped through the gap and descended into the unknown. The stairwell was tight and claustrophobic, the air thick with dust. Cole kept his flashlight low, its dim beam barely cutting through the darkness. Signs of abandonment were everywhere: discarded equipment, emergency rations that had long since rotted, rusted out maintenance panels. Old security barriers lined the walls, most of them offline. Some of the doors here were reinforced, others had been forced open. At the bottom, he found another corridor, this one older than the rest of the vault. Less polished. More industrial. Nexus Core built this place to last. But that also meant it had secrets. A distant clang echoed through the stairwell above. Something had found the path he'd taken. Cole swallowed his nerves and moved faster. At the end of the corridor, a heavy blast door loomed before him. A keycard reader was embedded in the wall. The NCI logo was stamped into the steel. A small display flickered with a message. Security lock engaged, biometric access required. Cole cursed under his breath. Of course it wouldn't be easy. Then, footsteps. Not just one set. Multiple. The things in the vault weren't just wandering anymore. They were hunting him. The first creature lunged. Cole barely dodged, rolling to the side as its metal-clawed hands scraped across the wall, leaving deep gouges in the steel. It moved fast. Too fast. Cole gritted his teeth and swung the multitool like a knife, aiming for its throat. The blade barely sank in, scraping across rotted flesh and exposed wiring. The thing didn't even flinch. It lashed out, knocking him backward. Cole hit the ground hard, pain exploding across his ribs. The second creature was closing in. He only had seconds. His hand brushed against something, a loose pipe from the wall. Cole grabbed it and swung with everything he had. The pipe caved in the side of the creature's skull with a sickening crunch. Sparks erupted from its exposed wiring, its body seizing violently. It twitched once, twice, then collapsed. Cole barely had time to breathe. The blast door clicked open. He staggered to his feet, bloody pipe still clenched in his hand, and bolted through. The door slammed shut behind him, sealing the horrors inside. For now, the silence felt unnatural. Cole staggered forward, his grip tight around the bloodied pipe. His breath came in ragged gulps, his body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Behind him, the blast door stood sealed, a final barrier between him and whatever horrors lurked inside. For now, he was safe. But safe where? The room was larger than he expected, its walls lined with corroded panels and dead monitors displaying the Nexus Core Industries, NCI, emblem. This wasn't the exit. It was a transition chamber. Cole dropped to one knee, taking stock of himself. His hands were scraped and bloodied, knuckles raw from the fight. A dull ache throbbed along his ribs, bruised, but nothing broken. His makeshift weapon was still intact, dented but usable. He checked his bag. Water, a flashlight, a multitool, a first aid kit. Not much. He needed more. He needed answers. A single monitor flickered in the dim light. Unlike the others, this one was still running. Cole frowned, stepping closer. The screen buzzed, Its text distorted. Outside clearance required. Director protocol override active. Project Revenant status, error. If you are reading this, you were not meant to leave. A chill ran down his spine. Then, the screen went dark. The only way out was forward. Cole exhaled sharply. He didn't know what waited beyond this chamber. But staying here wasn't an option. He took one last look at the sealed blast door behind him. Then, gripping the pipe tighter, he turned toward the unknown.
The world may have ended, but humanity remains. The path to rebuilding is never easy, and in the wasteland, only the strongest survive. But for those brave enough to face the shadows of the past, there is always hope, no matter how faint. Will they break the cycle, or will war return again to claim what's left? Like and comment for the next chapter of Wasteland Odyssey. Until then, stay strong. And keep moving forward.